Hello aspirants. So we are going to start another video lecture where we are going to talk about CPI, WPI and PPI. So you can say we are going to talk about measurement of inflation, that how in any economy that inflation is measured. So let's begin with that topic. So if you see, when we talk about measurement of inflation, so we have basically three ways to measure inflation, that is producer price index, number 2 wholesale price index, and number 3 consumer price index. Now here if I talk about these three indexes, so in India we only refer these two. So in our economy or in Indian economy, inflation is measured using WPI. So in short we call it WPI and CPI. Okay, so using WPI and CPI. Now, before we discuss this topic in detail, so I will say one thing, that this topic is very, very important for your prelims. So when I am saying very, very important, so if you see the previous year papers, you will find that UPSC has asked frequently a question from WPI and CPI. So you can check the PYQ or previous year questions of UPSC prelims. So especially if you see from 2011 till 2023, so you will find that this question has been asked multiple times. Okay, so at least you will find in this time period at least 6 to 7 times they have asked this question. Okay, so with this frequency we can say that this topic is very, very important for your prelims. Now once you know that this is important for prelims, so another thing that you must know, that what nature of question they can ask. Now for example, first of all, like as I told you in my one of the video lecture class, that what is the meaning of inflation. So in meaning of inflation we have seen that our focus is on essential products, okay, or you can say essential goods and services. So here you have to first remember that the number of essential products they are emphasizing on, means how many essential products are there in WPI and CPI. So if you see WPI and CPI, so basically if I talk about CPI, so in CPI there are 6 variants of CPI. So number 1 is CPI industrial worker, number 2 is CPI agricultural labor, and number 3 is CPI rural worker. Similarly there is CPI rural, CPI urban, and CPI combine. So when we say CPI combine, it means rural plus urban. So we are talking about this. Okay. So we are talking about CPI rural plus urban. So these are the 6, you can say, variants of CPI we have. Now if you see that first 3 are based on, you can say, class. First 3 are based on class, whereas rest 3 are based on area. Whereas with respect to WPI, there is one pan India. So you can say WPI combined, just like CPI combined. So for your exam, these two are very important. Okay. So ultimately, first we will see the number of items for which they measure the inflation. Now, if I talk about WPI, so you can say in WPI there are 697 items. 697 items. Clear? So 697 items are there in WPI. Clear? All these items are goods in nature. So means these 697 item does not include any services. All are goods in nature. Whereas if I talk about CPI combined, so it include 200 items. And these 200 items include both goods and services. Goods and services. Although, if you are interested to know that how many items are there in IW, AL and RW, although I'll tell you that also, but for your exam it is not relevant. So again I am telling that these numbers are not relevant for your exam, but for your curiosity I'll tell you in this class. Okay. So CPI IW has 260 items. And all these items are both goods and services. Similarly, AL also has 260 items. Similarly, rural worker also has 260 items. So ultimately 260 items each in all these above three. Okay. So this is what you have to remember. So when I am using a word items, it means I am talking about essential products, and these essential products include both goods and services. Okay. Now, CPI rural, if you see CPI rural, it has 448 items and CPI urban has 460 items. Clear? So this is what to, again you have to, you can say no need to remember. So CPI combined is basically an average of CPI rural and urban, and it comes out to be 200. So basically it is a weighted average. Okay. So you just have to remember this 200. Above numbers no need to remember, but for your curiosity I have told, or I have mentioned here. Clear? Now, another thing that you have to remember, when this WPI is published, so WPI data is published on a monthly basis. WPI data is published on monthly basis. So this is the another thing that you have to remember. Clear? Similarly, CPI data, that is CPI combined, is also published on monthly basis. Okay. This is also published on monthly basis. Third, who published this data? So can anyone tell me? So the answer is DPIIT. So if you know the full form, please tell me in comment section. So DPIIT, which comes under which ministry? That is Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Ministry of Commerce and Industry. So ultimately DPII stands for Department for the Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. Department for the Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. So this is the department which is responsible for publishing WPI data. Okay. So here another thing that you have to remember. Now the old name of this DPIIT is DIPP. So DIPP is the old name of DPIIT. So we have changed DIPP, or we have replaced DIPP with DPIIT. So DIPP stands for Department for Industrial Policy and Promotion. So earlier DPIIT was known as DIPP. Now why I am telling you, because if you see the previous year questions, especially the name has been changed after 2018, or you can say 2018-19. So if you see a question before that, so there in your question it has been written DIPP. Okay. So that time we call this department as DIPP. Similarly, if you see that before 2014-15 in WPI there are 676 items. Okay, 676 items. So you can say till 2014-15. So I am writing here because some of you may say that ki sir, I saw the previous year question, but there the number has been written 676 and that was a correct option. Yes, that was a correct option because it was or it is before 2014. But now or currently it is 697. So if you find, or you can say right now, if you find 676 in any of the question, that is wrong. Okay. So the current one is 697. So you must know that ki these values are updated. Clear? So this is what DPIIT. Okay. Next question that UPSC can ask you, the base year. Okay. So base year. So before I tell you the base year, who published the CPI data? That is NSO, National Statistical Office, which comes under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So in short, we call it MOSPI. Okay. So NSO is responsible for publishing CPI, which comes under which or ministry, that is MOSPI. Okay. Now, if you see the base year, if you see base year, so base year for WPI is 2011-12, whereas the base year for CPI is 2012. Now, for this, for one it is 2011-12 and for another it is 2012. So here you have to remember one thing, that when I am using a word base year 2011-12, it means I am talking about financial year. Okay. So this is what you have to remember, that here I am talking about financial year. Okay. So when I am using a word base year 2011-12, it means here my focus is on financial year. So financial year starts from 1st April till 31st March. But when I am using a base year for CPI 2012, it means I am talking about calendar year. So calendar year starts from 1st January till 31st December. Okay. Similarly, we have another year, that is agriculture year. So when we will study agriculture, so there we'll talk about agriculture year, which starts from 1st July till 30th of June. So in economy there are 3 years: financial year, calendar year and agriculture year. Clear? So ultimately we have 3 years, but the base year for WPI is 2011-12, whereas the base year for, you can say, CPI is 2012. Now definitely you have a doubt that why we have a base year. So purpose of base year is to compare. Okay. The purpose of base year is to compare. Means what? So for example, the purpose of base year is to compare. Now what we have to compare is, basically we are talking about inflation. Okay, so we have to compare that if last month the price of this product is X rupees. Okay, so this month what is the price of this product? So we have to compare that, is it same or reduced or increased? Okay, so ultimately you need some reference year, okay, or reference time period. So base year is that thing. Okay, so base year you can say is a reference period from where we can compare. Okay, from where we can compare. So this is known as reference period. Now when we are talking about base year or reference year, so ultimately the point comes in your mind that how we select the base year. Okay, so there is some criteria. There is some criteria for selection of base year. Number one, if I talk about criteria for selection of base year, number one, so first thing that you have to remember is, number one is that year should have, or you can say base year must have very less or no fluctuation. Very less or no fluctuation. So when I am saying very less or no fluctuation, it means that year must have minimum fluctuation, or you can say no fluctuation. So when I am talking about fluctuation, means fluctuation in terms of macro parameters, like your growth should be, you can say, steady, or you can say there should be not like this ki sudden fall in the growth or sudden increase. So it should be gradual one. Similarly, inflation rate should be again gradual one. Similarly, your balance of payment should be, you can say, gradual one. So it is not like that ki there is some shocks to the economy that time period. So for example, pandemic. So pandemic has disturbed our macro parameters. Clear? Similarly, in 2008, we have crisis. Okay, or you can say we have global crisis that has impact on India's macro parameter. So ultimately, macro parameters are less disturbed in that year. Okay, so you can understand in this way also. So that is why less or no fluctuation of macro parameters. So means stable, that year should be a stable year. Clear? So next point that is needed is that year, or you can say there should be availability of reliable and accurate data. Okay, so you can say availability of reliable and accurate data. Okay, so this is the second thing. And third thing is that whatever items for which we are comparing the prices, that should be available in that year. Okay, that should be available in that year. So it means you can say that basket size or the number of items that we are comparing must be comparable. So for example, like if I talk about WPI, so before 2011-12, the base year for WPI was 2004-5. Now in 2004-5, your smartphones were not essential one. But in 2011-12, we have seen that has become essential one. Okay, or relevant one. Similarly, laptops in 2004-5, they are luxury. But now it is essential one. So ultimately, your basket size must have those items which I can compare with current time period. Clear? So I have to see the price rise or increase in inflation rate from base year. So for that item must be available in base year. So this is what is the logic. Okay, so that is why if you have understood this thing, so no doubt in saying that ki base year is revised, you can say, periodically. Okay, so base year needs revision, so it cannot be fixed. Okay, so ultimately nowadays also there is a demand that base year must be shift to 2016. Okay, 2016-17. Okay, so there is a demand, or you can say some says 2015-16. So there is a demand to change the base year from 2011-12 to 2015-16. Clear? So this is what you have to understood. Now, if you see here, it has been written. So as I told you that WPI measures inflation for goods only, and that is at wholesale level. So ultimately, when we have to compare the prices, so we want to see the prices at all the level. So ultimately, you know that any product passes through three stages. So first of all is producer, or you can say factory stage. Then it goes to distributor, so that is wholesale stage. And finally, it goes to shopkeeper, that is retail. Now we purchase product at this level. So ultimately, the price of product at every level is different. So ultimately, producer, so suppose there is any product. So if suppose producer is selling at 10 rupees to the wholesaler, so we can say that at producer level, the price is 10 rupees. Okay. Whereas at wholesale level, the price is, for example, 12 rupees. Okay. And at retail level, the price is, for example, 15 rupees. Now, if you see that ultimately this is the level where taxes are included, but at this level taxes are not included. So ultimately I have to see or check that inflation is at what rate, or you can say at what level. So you can easily compare the prices and you can identify is inflation at producer level or wholesale level or retail level. So for example, you can understand in this way. We assume that, for example, on this 15 rupees, 2 rupees is the tax. 2 rupees is the tax. Okay. Now, for example, now government says that the new tax will be 5 rupees. 5 rupees. So can we say that the product price at producer level will remain same, 10 rupees? Here also it remains same, 12 rupees. And here you will see that now the new price is 18 rupees. Because earlier we are paying 2 rupees, now 5 rupees. So ultimately the new price is 18 rupees. So we can say with one surety that the price of the product has increased at retail level, and the reason is taxes. So ultimately inflation is at retail level, not at producer and wholesale level. But in India we are using only these two. Okay, in India we are using only these two. So this is what you have to remember. Now you can take another example. Now for example, wholesaler has increased the price. So it means that here the price is 10 rupees. Okay, here the price has increased, for example, 14 rupees. Now ultimately this 14 rupees will be reflected here also. So the new price is 22 rupees. So here you can say that price has increased but due to wholesale level, or you can say at wholesale level. So ultimately when you know that at which level price has increased, then only you can take appropriate steps. Okay. So for example, if suppose there is a shortage of raw material, there is a shortage of raw material, so no doubt price will increase at this level itself. Okay. So ultimately we have these three level. Now with respect to PPI, that is producer level, or you can say producer price index, with respect to producer price index, government of India has set up one committee. Can anyone tell me what is the name of the committee? That is a committee which is headed by B.N. Goldar. So maybe it is called Goldar or Goldar. Okay, so for pronunciation, so there can be a pronunciation error. Okay, so ultimately the spelling is Goldar. Okay, B.N. Goldar committee. Okay, B.N. Goldar committee. Now this committee has recommended that India should move to producer price index, but unfortunately government has not accepted it. Okay, not accepted it. But the rationale given by this committee is that at international level, means when we see the developed countries, so most of the developed countries are measuring inflation at two level, that is producer and retail level. But in our case, we are measuring at wholesale and retail level. Clear? Now here another thing that you have to remember, that just like WPI is published monthly basis, CPI is also monthly basis. Now sometimes you ask a question that, sir, how to read a newspaper? So here I'll say that reading a newspaper is very easy if you understand the pattern of news. Okay, so ultimately I'll give you one example. Now CPI data is released on every month, that is 12th of every month. So if it is a weekdays, Monday to Friday, so if 12th is you can say if in between Monday to Friday, if the date is 12th, okay, so you will find that it is released. But if it is weekend, that is Saturday, Sunday, then automatically it is released on, you can say, Monday. So if suppose on Saturday it's 12th, so automatically it will release on 14th, that is Monday. And if suppose on Sunday it is 12th, then it is released on Monday, that is 13th. Okay, so 12th of every month it is released. So please correct it. Here I have written Monday. Okay, so 12th of every month it is released. So ultimately, if you are reading any newspaper, that is The Hindu or Indian Express, The Hindu or Indian Express, or you are referring any other source that is on YouTube, so you will see that if 12th it is released, so on 13th you will find that in newspaper there is a headline that retail inflation has increased or decreased. Okay, so there will be headline with respect to retail inflation. So CPI is also known as retail inflation. So CPI is also known as retail inflation. So this is what you have to remember. Clear? So this will you will find in newspaper. So ultimately, once you have a retail inflation news, so after some time you will find that there will be meeting of monetary policy committee. So depending on retail inflation, so you know that right now monetary policy committee has been given a target to maintain retail inflation, or you can say CPI, in a range of 4% plus minus 2%. So depending on this, you can say monthly news, monetary policy committee decides that repo rate has to be increased or decreased. Clear? So this is what you have to remember. Clear? So that is why news comes in some pattern. So if you understood the pattern, you will understood that which news will come when, okay, and what to study from that. Clear? Or what points you have to pick from that newspaper. So I hope you find it interesting or relevant for your exam. Okay, that a new approach I have given to you. So now if you see the wholesale price index, so ultimately when it comes to wholesale price index, it means measuring inflation at, you can say, producer level. Okay, similarly, sorry, PPI, sorry, wholesale ke andar we are measuring inflation at wholesale prices, and wholesale price index does not include services. So it has been clearly mentioned here. Okay, now another thing that you have to mention or you have to remember, so as I told you that there are 697 items, but previously there were 676 items, so it has been mentioned here. Clear? Now here you have to remember one thing, that although we are interested only in WPI and CPI, okay, WPI and CPI, so in WPI 697 items are there. So those 697 items are categorized into these three: primary article, fuel and power, manufactured products. Okay, so they have been given a weightage, that is 20.1%, 14.9% and 65%. Although you don't have to remember these numbers, okay, because rarely they ask these numbers, but they can sometimes ask you that you have to arrange them. Okay, arrange them in some order, means increasing or decreasing order. So more weightage has been given to manufactured products. So this is a factual information. Manufactured product, then it is, you can say, primary article, and then it is fuel and power. So this is what you have to remember. So either they can ask you to arrange it in increasing order or decreasing order. Now just like your WPI, we have CPI also. So I'll just open economic survey for you. So in economic survey you will see that in CPI there are some items. Okay, there are some items. So you can say 6 items are there. Okay, so if I talk about 6 items, so like one is food and beverages. So within food and beverages there are some items. So ultimately food and beverages has been given a weightage of 45.9%. Then it is pan, tobacco and intoxicant. So ultimately you can say gives CPI gives importance to pan, tobacco and intoxicant also. So it means your government itself under CPI recognize that they are essential items. Okay, so pan, tobacco and intoxicants. So 2.4% has been given a weightage. Next is clothing and footwear. 6.5% weightage has been given. So ultimately clothes and footwear. Housing 10.1%. Fuel and light 6.8% and miscellaneous 28.3%. Now ultimately here you have to remember one thing, that miscellaneous include your health services. Okay, health services, education services like school education, primary health care. So that is a part of miscellaneous. Okay, so ultimately here again you have to remember the order ascending or descending. So more weightage has been given to food and beverages. Okay, and less weightage has been given to pan, tobacco and intoxicant. Although less weightage has been given, but still a weightage has been given to these items. So less weightage. So ultimately you know the order for this also. Okay, so percentage, no need to remember. So I can say you with surety that no one is going to ask you the percentage. So kabhi you started mugging up the percentage, so that is not required. Clear? So this is what I have taken directly from your economic survey. Okay, directly from economic survey. Now, although the same has been covered in the Study IQ book also, that is primary article weightage has been given 20.1%, so it is 20.12. So just you have to remember 14.9 fuel and power, and manufactured 64.97, so 65. Okay, so ultimately you have to remember. Okay, now here if you see, whereas for CPI also they have given the data. Okay, so ultimately for CPI, as I told you that CPI there are 6 variants. Okay, so 260 item each, but base year for urban, rural and combined, okay, it is 2012. Clear? Now for CPI agriculture worker and rural labor, the base year is 1986-87, whereas for CPI industrial worker it is 2016. So that is you have to remember. So it has been recently changed. Okay, now these CPI industrial worker, CPI rural labor and agriculture worker, so they are basically released and compiled by, you can say, Labor Bureau, which comes under Ministry of Labor and Employment. So this is what you have to remember. Clear? This is what you have to remember. Okay, now ultimately there is a difference between like CPI or WPI. Basically it's written at producer level, so corrected, so it is at wholesale level, and CPI is at consumer level. WPI does not include services, whereas CPI include both goods and services. So if you see, in CPI more weightage is given to manufactured goods, whereas in CPI more weightage is given to food items. So we have seen that there in WPI 65% weightage has been given, whereas in CPI 45% weightage has been given to food item. So ultimately this has been shown in pie diagram also for your reference. Clear? So this is what you have to remember with respect to CPI and WPI. Okay, so I hope you find this series helpful. Okay, so if you find it helpful, so please comment below the comment section or below the video. Okay, and I'll come with more interesting topic for you. So we'll meet soon. Jai Hind and have a nice day.